Welcome to Whispered Tales. Today, we're diving into a journey that many of us struggle with every day. Meet Ethan Carter, a young man in his late 20s, living in a bustling city filled with ambition, noise, and endless opportunities. On the outside, Ethan's life seemed normal. He had a stable job, good friends, and a comfortable apartment. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm was brewing. Every time he tried to take a step forward, a voice inside his head whispered, "Are you really capable? What if you fail? Maybe you're not ready." These doubts weren't new. They had started subtly during his teenage years, when he would hesitate to raise his hand in class, fearing he might look foolish. Over the years, these whispers had grown louder, turning into a constant companion that shadowed his every decision. Even the simplest tasks, like sending an important email, applying for a new opportunity, or asking someone out, felt like climbing a mountain. Ethan's story is not unique. Many of us carry these inner critics, these nagging doubts that make us question our worth and abilities. The tricky part is the doubts are not always loud. Sometimes they are quiet, subtle, almost unnoticed, yet their impact is devastating. They plant seeds of hesitation, feeding fear and self-criticism until we start believing that our dreams are too far out of reach. But the story isn't about giving in to doubt. It's about recognizing it, confronting it, and ultimately silencing it. Today, through Ethan's journey, we will explore how doubt starts, how it grows, and the steps one can take to reclaim their confidence and inner peace. Because silencing doubt is not about eliminating fear, it's about learning to move forward despite it. Ethan had always believed that his doubts were just part of his personality, something he would have to live with forever. But one chilly evening, as he walked home from work, he noticed something he had never truly seen before. Across the street, a small art gallery displayed an exhibition titled "Courage in Everyday Life." Drawn in by curiosity, Ethan stepped inside. The gallery was quiet, filled with soft music and warm light. Each painting told a story of someone confronting their fears: an elderly woman climbing a mountain at 70, a young girl performing on stage despite shaking hands, a man leaving a secure job to follow his dream of starting a small bakery. For the first time, Ethan felt a stirring deep inside, a mixture of awe and discomfort. Could he ever be that brave? As he lingered near a painting of a stormy sea with a small boat navigating its waves, Ethan realized something crucial. His doubts weren't signals of reality. They were stories he had been telling himself. They weren't truths. They were fears disguised as warnings. The more he let them dictate his actions, the more power they gained over his life. It was a moment of awakening. For years, Ethan had allowed his inner voice to act like a guardian, protecting him from imagined dangers, but in reality, it had become a jailer, keeping him from experiencing growth, joy, and opportunity. That night, he made a silent promise. He would no longer let doubt define him. He would face it, examine it, and find ways to silence it, not by ignoring it, but by understanding it. This moment of realization is something we all must encounter. Doubt often thrives in the shadows of ignorance, in moments when we fail to question its origin. Recognizing that doubt is not a fact, but a thought, is the first step towards freedom. And for Ethan, this recognition would set him on a path filled with challenges, victories, and small yet powerful transformations. The very next morning, Ethan woke up with a strange mixture of determination and nervousness. His mind, however, was still noisy. The familiar whispers of doubt crept in almost immediately. "You'll never finish that project on time. What if your boss doesn't like your ideas? What if you mess everything up? But this time, Ethan decided to respond differently. Instead of running from the thoughts, he paused, closed his eyes, and asked himself, are these doubts facts or just fears disguised as possibilities? The difference was subtle but powerful. For the first time, he separated the truth from the fear. The project had clear steps, his boss had always encouraged creativity, and mistakes, if they happened, were not failures but opportunities to learn. Ethan took a deep breath, grabbed his notebook, and started mapping out the project step by step. Every time a doubtful thought arose, he countered it with a concrete action. Instead of saying, I can't do this, he said, I will start with this small part and see where it takes me. By midday, he realized something remarkable. The more he acted despite the doubt, the quieter the whispers became. They didn't disappear completely. That's not how doubt works, but they lost their power. The fear that once paralyzed him now became a signal, a gentle reminder to proceed carefully, rather than a command to stop entirely. Ethan's first confrontation with his doubts was not a grand victory. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it marked the beginning of a shift. He learned that silence doesn't come from avoidance or perfection. It comes from action, clarity, and self-trust. Each step forward chips away at the walls that doubt builds around our hearts. This chapter of Ethan's journey teaches us a critical lesson. The first step in silencing inner doubts is acknowledgement, paired with action. Doubts are natural, but surrendering to them is optional. By choosing to act even when we fear, we begin to reclaim control over our minds and lives. A few days after his small victory over doubt, Ethan noticed a recurring pattern. The more he ignored his fears, the more they seemed to retreat, but they never fully vanished. One evening, as he prepared for bed, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. For the first time, he didn't just see a face, he saw the reflection of his inner critic staring back. The mirror became a metaphor for self-awareness. Ethan realized that silencing doubt wasn't about completely shutting it out. It was about recognizing its voice, understanding its origin, and responding wisely. He started keeping a small journal by his bed, noting every negative thought that arose during the day. I'm not smart enough for this presentation. They won't like my idea. I'm too inexperienced to try this. Each entry was followed by Ethan asking himself, is this thought true or just fear speaking? Slowly, patterns emerged. Most doubts were echoes of past experiences, old criticisms from teachers, friends, or even himself. They were memories disguised as warnings, not accurate reflections of reality. This practice of self-awareness became a daily ritual. Every morning, Ethan would look in the mirror, take a deep breath, and remind himself, I am capable. I have faced fear before, and I can do it again. By naming the doubts, he reduced their power. By acknowledging them, he could separate himself from them. Through this process, Ethan discovered a profound truth. Doubt only controls you when you let it define you. Awareness is the first step to freedom. By shining a light in the whispers in our minds, we expose them for what they are, temporary thoughts, not eternal truths. And in that recognition, we begin to reclaim the space within ourselves that fear has occupied for too long. Ethan quickly realized that silencing doubt was not a one-time battle. It was a series of small, consistent victories. He decided to challenge himself daily, setting little goals that pushed him just beyond his comfort zone. These goals weren't massive, they didn't require heroic feats, but they were meaningful enough to teach him that he could act despite fear. One morning, he signed up for a local public speaking workshop. Standing in front of strangers, his stomach churned with anxiety. The familiar voice of doubt whispered, "You'll make a fool of yourself. No one will care what you say." But Ethan remembered the lessons from the gallery, the mirror, and his journal. He breathed deeply and reminded himself, this is practice. Each word is progress. When he finished his short speech, the applause was warm, genuine, and surprisingly uplifting. Ethan felt a surge of confidence he hadn't felt in years. That small victory didn't erase all doubt, but it created a new story, one where he could succeed even when fear tried to stop him.
Over the next few weeks, Ethan applied this principle to other areas of his life. He started sharing his ideas more openly at work, initiating conversations he would have normally avoided, and even took up a hobby he had abandoned years ago, painting. Each small action reinforced the idea that doubt is a signal, not a stop sign. Through these incremental wins, Ethan began to notice something remarkable. His mind, which once felt like a battlefield, started to feel like a training ground. Doubt still existed, but it no longer commanded his life. Instead, it became something he could observe, analyze, and respond to. And with every small win, he strengthened the mental muscles that would help him face even greater challenges. This chapter of Ethan's journey shows us a crucial lesson. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. Silence your inner doubts not by expecting perfection, but by embracing small, consistent steps that build trust in yourself. Each small victory becomes a brick, slowly constructing a foundation of courage, resilience, and self-belief. As Ethan's confidence grew through small victories, he realized that doubt wasn't just about everyday decisions. It often lurked in the shadows of his deepest fears. For him, this fear had always been failure in a big, visible way. The thought of risking something meaningful only to be rejected or judged made his heart race and his mind spiral. One evening, Ethan received an email from a prestigious conference inviting him to present his work, a rare opportunity that could advance his career significantly. Excitement battled with panic. What if I mess up? What if they laugh? What if I'm not good enough? The familiar doubts returned, louder than ever. But Ethan remembered the journey he had been on, the gallery, the mirror, the small wins. He decided to confront this fear head-on. He began preparing meticulously, not out of obsession, but as a way to respect both himself and the opportunity. He rehearsed his presentation in front of friends, recorded himself, and faced the hardest part, speaking to a mirror while imagining the audience's reactions. The night before the conference, doubt still whispered, but Ethan had learned a powerful technique. He acknowledged the fear instead of resisting it. I'm scared. I might fail. That's okay. Fear is just a feeling, not a fact. By separating himself from the fear, he prevented it from controlling his actions. When the day arrived, Ethan stepped onto the stage with a pounding heart, yet a steady mind. He spoke clearly, passionately, and authentically. The audience responded with engagement, nods, and applause. Ethan hadn't eliminated doubt. He had learned to walk with it rather than letting it dictate his path.
This chapter teaches us an essential lesson. Our deepest doubts often appear when the stakes are high. Facing them directly, with preparation, awareness, and courage, transforms fear from a paralyzing force into a guide that sharpens our focus and determination. By confronting what scares us most, we discover strength we never knew existed, and the whispers of doubt lose much of their power. After the conference, Ethan felt a shift within himself. It wasn't that doubt had vanished completely, he knew better than to expect that, but its influence over him had lessened. What had changed was his perspective. He realized that the way he interpreted situations often dictated the strength of his doubts. Previously, a minor mistake could spiral into a catastrophic story in his mind. I ruined everything. I'll never succeed. But now, Ethan started asking a simple yet powerful question. Is this a problem or just a challenge? Reframing situations allowed him to respond with clarity instead of panic. One afternoon, Ethan faced a setback at work. A proposal he had worked tirelessly on was rejected by a client. In the past, this would have triggered a storm of self-criticism. You're not good enough. Why even try? This time, however, he paused, took a deep breath, and looked at the situation objectively. He asked himself, what can I learn from this? How can I improve? By shifting perspective, doubt transformed from an enemy into a teacher. Instead of paralyzing him, it became a tool for growth, highlighting areas for improvement without threatening his self-worth. Ethan also began sharing this approach with friends, encouraging them to view their doubts as signals to examine, not as verdicts on their abilities. This chapter reminds us that silencing inner doubts isn't about eliminating thoughts, it's about changing how we respond to them. Perspective is a lens through which we can observe fear without letting it dictate our actions. When we see doubts as feedback rather than condemnation, we create space to move forward confidently and purposefully. Ethan's journey illustrates that transformation is as much about mindset as it is about action. By mastering perspective, he learned that doubt can coexist with courage and that one does not cancel out the other. The whispers of fear may remain, but they no longer control the narrative of his life. Even as Ethan gained strength and perspective, he realized that silencing inner doubts wasn't a journey he had to take alone. Doubt often thrives in isolation, feeding on loneliness and uncertainty. Seeking support, guidance, and encouragement became a vital part of his transformation. Ethan reached out to his mentor, Sophia, a seasoned professional who had faced her own share of fears and setbacks. Over coffee, she shared her story of struggling with self-doubt and how small, consistent actions helped her regain confidence. Ethan realized that he wasn't failing, he was learning, and that learning could be faster and more effective with someone to guide and reflect with him. He also opened up to close friends about his struggles, something he had never done before. Admitting vulnerability was initially uncomfortable, but the reactions he received were overwhelmingly positive. Friends offered encouragement, practical advice, and even constructive criticism, helping him refine his approach to challenges without being consumed by fear. Through these interactions, Ethan discovered another truth. Doubt often diminishes when we bring it into the light of shared experience. What feels insurmountable alone can become manageable when discussed openly. Just as darkness loses its power when exposed to light, doubts lose their grip when shared with trusted allies. This chapter highlights a crucial lesson for everyone. Transformation is rarely a solitary journey. Seeking support doesn't show weakness, it shows courage and wisdom. Mentors, friends, or even supportive communities provide perspective, encouragement, and accountability. They remind us that we are not defined by our fears and that together we are stronger in facing them. By the end of this chapter, Ethan understood that silencing inner doubts is not only an internal battle, it's also a relational one. Building a network of understanding, trust, and shared growth amplifies our ability to confront fear and move forward with confidence. As Ethan continued his journey, he realized that one of the strongest fuels for doubt had always been his obsession with perfection. Since childhood, he had believed that mistakes were unacceptable, that every action needed to be flawless. This mindset had kept him cautious, hesitant, and trapped in cycles of overthinking. One evening, while working on a personal project, a short story he had been writing for months, he found himself stuck on a single paragraph. The inner voice whispered, "It's not good enough. It will never be good. Why even bother?" Frustrated, Ethan paused and reflected. He asked himself, what if good enough is enough? That simple question marked a turning point. Ethan let go of the need for perfection and embraced imperfection. He allowed himself to write freely, knowing the first draft might be flawed. To his surprise, once he released the pressure of perfection, creativity flowed. Ideas came easier, sentences felt more natural, and the story, though imperfect, was authentic. Ethan applied this principle in other areas of his life as well. At work, he submitted projects without obsessing over minor details. In social interactions, he allowed himself to be candid instead of rehearsed. Slowly, he noticed that mistakes no longer triggered crippling doubt. They became opportunities to learn and grow. This chapter teaches a profound lesson. Doubt often thrives in the soil of perfectionism. When we demand flawlessness, fear multiplies and hesitation dominates. By embracing imperfection, we create space for action, learning, and resilience. We learn that worth and progress are not determined by perfection, but by the courage to try, fail, and try again.
Through this, Ethan discovered freedom. He realized that inner doubts cannot fully control those who accept imperfection and continue moving forward. By letting go of the impossible standard of perfect, he could finally act with confidence, creativity, and authenticity. As Ethan delved deeper into silencing his inner doubts, he realized that mental strength alone wasn't enough. Doubt often manifested physically: racing heart, tense muscles, shallow breathing, and these physical reactions fed the mental spiral. To truly overcome fear, Ethan needed to understand the mind-body connection. He began incorporating simple daily practices into his routine. Morning meditation became a sacred time, allowing him to center his thoughts and observe doubts without judgment. Deep breathing exercises helped calm the nervous energy that arose before presentations or important meetings. Even short walks outside offered clarity, as movement and fresh air provided space for reflection and focus. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Ethan noticed his usual surge of doubt. Instead of resisting it, he lay on the floor, closed his eyes, and focused on each breath. Slowly, he felt the tension release from his shoulders, the tightness in his chest soften, and the racing thoughts slow down. In that moment, he realized something profound. When the body relaxes, the mind follows. Ethan also paid attention to his energy through diet and sleep. Balanced meals, hydration, and proper rest became tools in managing doubt. He noticed that after a good night's sleep, challenges that once seemed insurmountable felt manageable. His inner voice became quieter, more reasonable, and less domineering. This chapter highlights an essential truth. Silencing inner doubts is not just a mental exercise, it's a holistic practice. Our thoughts, emotions, and physical states are interconnected. Nurturing the body strengthens the mind, and calming the mind supports the body. When we address both, we create a resilient foundation capable of facing fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt with greater ease. Ethan's journey shows that overcoming doubt is not about ignoring the mind's whispers. It's about integrating mind and body practices to create harmony, resilience, and confidence that permeates every aspect of life. As Ethan grew more attuned to his doubts, he realized that much of their power came from the story he had been telling himself for years. This story was filled with past failures, imagined limitations, and endless what-ifs. It had become the lens through which he viewed the world, a lens that made fear seem bigger than it actually was. Determined to change this, Ethan decided to rewrite his narrative.
He took out his journal and began reflecting on his achievements, moments of courage, and instances when he had succeeded despite fear. He wrote down reminders of times he had taken risks, spoken up, or pursued a dream, even when doubt tried to stop him. The exercise was transformative. Seeing his accomplishments on paper reminded him that doubt had no absolute authority over reality. The inner voice might say, "You're not capable," but the facts told a different story. He had faced challenges, grown, and succeeded multiple times. Slowly, the negative narrative weakened, replaced by a story of resilience, courage, and self-belief. Ethan also reframed future challenges. Instead of imagining worst-case scenarios, he visualized outcomes rooted in possibility, preparation, and effort. When doubt whispered, he countered it with facts and proactive steps. "Yes, I'm nervous, but I have the skills to handle this situation. Fear is normal, but it doesn't control my choices."
This chapter teaches an essential principle. Our minds are shaped by the stories we tell ourselves. Doubt often thrives on repetition of old, limiting narratives. By consciously rewriting your story to highlight strength, resilience, and past victories, you weaken doubt and empower yourself. Through this process, Ethan realized that silencing inner doubts wasn't just about facing fear, it was about taking control of the narrative of his own life. And once the story in your mind begins to reflect courage rather than fear, the whispers of doubt lose their authority, leaving space for action, growth, and fulfillment. As Ethan continued his journey, he discovered that silencing inner doubts was not a quick process. Doubt had been cultivated over years, sometimes decades, and it would not disappear overnight. Impatience often fueled frustration, which in turn amplified fear. Learning patience became a critical part of his transformation. One afternoon, after a setback at work, Ethan felt the familiar pang of self-criticism creeping in. In the past, he might have berated himself or given up entirely. This time, however, he paused and reminded himself that growth takes time. He thought of doubt as a stubborn tree. It couldn't be uprooted in a day, but it could be managed, pruned, and weakened with consistent care. Ethan began to celebrate small victories rather than waiting for monumental breakthroughs. Completing a presentation, having a difficult conversation, or even simply noticing a negative thought and redirecting it, each small success was a step forward. With patience, he could observe patterns in his thoughts, understand triggers, and gradually rewire his responses to fear. He also realized that setbacks were not failures, they were opportunities to practice patience and resilience. When doubt arose, he reminded himself, this is a journey, not a sprint. Every step forward counts, even if it feels slow. By adopting this mindset, he reduced self-criticism, increased self-compassion, and built the endurance to face bigger challenges over time. This chapter teaches an important lesson. Patience is a vital ally in silencing inner doubts. Transformation doesn't happen instantly. Each effort, each conscious action against fear adds up, and over time, the cumulative effect is profound. By practicing patience, we allow ourselves the grace to grow steadily, strengthening our confidence, resilience, and ability to act despite doubt. Ethan's journey shows that silence is not immediate, but with patience, dedication, and awareness, the constant whispers of doubt gradually fade into the background, allowing courage and clarity to take center stage. As Ethan progressed, he realized that silencing doubt required more than action, perspective, or patience. It required an inner anchor, something steady to ground him whenever fear threatened to overwhelm him. For him, this anchor took the form of his values, purpose, and personal principles.
Ethan reflected deeply on what mattered most to him: creativity, growth, honesty, and connection. Whenever doubt arose, he asked himself, does this thought align with my purpose, or is it just fear talking? Anchoring himself to these guiding principles provided clarity in moments of confusion. Instead of reacting impulsively to negative thoughts, he could step back, assess the situation, and make decisions rooted in meaning rather than panic.
He also found that writing down affirmations connected to his values was powerful. I act with courage because growth matters to me. I take steps forward because I value creativity and learning. Over time, repeating these affirmations in moments of doubt strengthened his internal foundation. Ethan's anchor was also emotional, a quiet sense of self-worth that wasn't dependent on others' opinions or past mistakes. Even when doubt whispered, he could remind himself, I am capable, I am growing, and I am enough. This steady inner compass allowed him to navigate challenges with calm confidence rather than being swept away by fear. This chapter teaches a crucial principle. An inner anchor, your values, purpose, or core beliefs, provides stability against doubt. While doubt can cloud judgment and create fear, anchoring ourselves in what truly matters gives us a reference point to act courageously. Ethan learned that even when doubt doesn't disappear, it loses its power when our decisions are guided by clarity and purpose. By finding his inner anchor, Ethan discovered a profound sense of freedom. Doubts might still arise, but they could no longer control his direction, his choices, or his belief in himself. In this chapter of his journey, he realized that true strength comes not from eliminating fear, but from grounding oneself in what is unwavering. As Ethan approached the final stages of his journey, he discovered a transformative truth. Doubt didn't always need to be silenced in the traditional sense. Instead, it could be harnessed as a source of motivation. Rather than seeing doubt as an enemy, he began to view it as a signal, a sign that something mattered, that he was pushing beyond comfort, and that growth was possible. For example, when preparing for a major career opportunity, Ethan felt the familiar pang of fear. What if I fail? What if I'm judged? Instead of allowing these thoughts to paralyze him, he reframed them. This fear means I care. Let it fuel my preparation and focus. The energy that once caused hesitation now drove him to research thoroughly, practice intentionally, and perform confidently. Ethan also noticed this principle applied in personal growth. Moments of self-doubt about relationships, hobbies, or personal challenges became opportunities to learn more about himself. Each doubt carried a message, a fear that could be examined, a skill that could be strengthened, or a boundary that could be clarified. Over time, he realized that doubt was not a stop sign, but a compass pointing towards growth. By turning doubt into motivation, Ethan experienced a shift in mindset. Instead of fighting fear, he collaborated with it. Instead of seeing doubt as a barrier, he saw it as a guide, signaling areas where courage, preparation, and self-reflection were needed. The whispers that once discouraged him now became a subtle push, reminding him to stay committed, focused, and resilient. This chapter teaches a vital lesson. Doubt can be a tool rather than a burden. When harnessed consciously, it encourages reflection, action, and progress. Ethan's journey shows that our inner critics, when reframed, can become powerful allies, driving us toward our goals rather than holding us back. In this way, doubt stops being a threat and starts being a catalyst for courage and achievement. Ethan's journey over the past months had transformed him in ways he could hardly have imagined.
The whispers of doubt, once relentless and overpowering, had been silenced not by force, but by understanding, action, and reflection. He had learned to acknowledge his fears, face them directly, reframe his perspective, embrace imperfection, nurture his mind and body, and ground himself in his values. Most importantly, he had discovered that doubt could even become a source of motivation. Looking back, Ethan realized that the journey wasn't just about achieving external success, it was about internal freedom. He no longer let fear dictate his choices or prevent him from pursuing what mattered most. Each decision, whether big or small, was made with awareness, courage, and confidence. The quiet storm that once consumed him had transformed into a calm, steady river of focus and resilience. He also noticed the ripple effects in his life. Relationships became more authentic as he no longer approached them with hesitation or self-doubt. Work became more fulfilling as he acted boldly and creatively without fear of judgment. Even everyday life felt richer because he had learned to trust himself, embrace challenges, and celebrate progress rather than perfection. Ethan's story teaches us a universal lesson. Silencing inner doubts is not about eliminating fear entirely, it's about learning to live with it wisely. It's about turning hesitation into action, fear into insight, and uncertainty into growth. Each of us has the power to face our doubts, to reclaim our inner voice, and to live boldly in the direction of our dreams. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. If you enjoyed Ethan's story and want more inspiring tales that not only entertain but also guide you to personal growth, don't forget to subscribe to Whisped Tales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an adventure that speaks to your heart. Next time, we'll come back with another story filled with lessons, inspiration, and insight just for you. Remember, your inner doubts may whisper, but your courage can always answer.